process to look at who we're hiring. You have, I think it's key. They can ask questions, prior history, where you live, where you're coming from. I just think it would be a good thing to have that be a part of the review board process. It's not a union issue because the union doesn't get involved until they swear their hands up and then they're police officers. So I don't think it will be a union issue. I did bring this up with the union, by the way. I called Darla and told her that I would probably bring in some information in reference to that, that the review would be a part of that. And again, also that they'd be a part of looking at the use of force continuum, what we have going on, and be a part. I think when the community sees that the shift is changing on that review board and they can bring up some ideas and policies and work with the police department, I think it'll work better. So I will be bringing a couple of motions about that at the end of the meeting in reference to the review board.
Thank you. I appreciate that feedback. If I could just address a bit of that, is we do the bias training. It's called fair and impartial training. We're actually doing what we call our refresher course that we have coming up. Unfortunately, some of our training has been put on hold due to the COVID situation, but we do that.
Is that virtual or still on the computer? We do it on the computer?
No, this is in person.
In person?
There's certain things you got to talk. I mean, I think we've all learned that this virtual stuff's kind of cool, but we need to see that body language and talk in person. I'm sure you wouldn't want to depose somebody without seeing them in person and reading the body language, and that's how you truly learn and exchange the information. The hiring a black officer is something that we work on constantly. I know that there is a push for putting more black officers in the black community, but I think we also have to look at the history, and some of you have talked about that this morning, of policing the black community. There was lawsuits, the Fearless Fours we had, that came before City Council that everybody honored. They had to file a lawsuit so that they could police in white communities. They weren't allowed to attend roll calls. They had to stay out back. They had to file lawsuits. These are black cops who had to file lawsuits to be able to be recognized as equals, which is why we had the problem here this past weekend in our nation. So I caution everybody, you hear it all the time, that history repeats itself. I know we have to do better, but we have to be careful of only putting black officers in black. I know you're not implying that, but I just, sometimes our words get twisted, and I want to point that out.
I do think that with my experience, which I do have it, is that, before officers hit the street, or before they're given that badge and that gun, I do think, even in the academy, ACC, whoever's training them now, that I think they need to have a course to where they're going into communities first and meeting leaders, meeting people, understanding the culture of different communities. When you come from a affluent community and now you're working at 29th and Lake, or it's a culture shock because you've always been told the negative about those people, this bad, this and that, when you see these things. So I think you have to give people, the tools out of the box and say, hey, we need you to go here first before you get to the next level so you can understand real culture and understand why an Hispanic person talks loud and talks with their hand. That's just the way they express themselves. They're not aggressive. That's just the way they express themselves. So I think, looking at those type of things, I think the review board could help with those type of things, looking at means and ways to be able to integrate everybody into every neighborhood. I've been told before, I want a white officer. That's happened to me before several times. So I do get it. I understand it. I just think that, communities don't get it, but that's something that we have as a city, have to let people know that we don't discriminate where a police officer goes in patrols, but we're making sure that everyone has the training so when they go to whatever community, that they're sensitive to the community, they understand that community, and they know that it can work with that community. And hopefully some of those officers can be a part of being working at some of the Little League, some of the coaches. I know it's not their community, but it goes a long way when police are working with the young people in communities. It really does.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And you as a former police officer, cops have a front row seat to the dysfunctionalism of America. We have a front row seat to the racism of America. You know how many times I've been called to a neighborhood as a patrolman and there's a suspicious person there. Well, what did he do? Well, he just doesn't belong here. Okay, I'm not stupid. I'm in an all-white neighborhood and there's a black guy here. I see it. I know it. And how many times you just got back in your car, thank you for calling us. Do you have any more problems, you call us back. And we go on our business. We don't stop them because we know what time of day it is. You've seen it.
Oh.
I'm sorry, so I need to stop. So next question.
Mr. Chair. Wait, we have Councilman Citro, Councilman Dingfelder, Councilman Vieira.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, sir.
Chief, it's probably too early for numbers. Do we have any numbers related to the protests, total of arrest and/or property damage?
We have 138 arrests so far. We expect to have more as we review the video of the chaos that ensued Saturday and Sunday night, some of the other ones. The issues we had over at the 30th and Bush area, we're still reviewing that. We're hoping to make more. I think once we're able to arrest more people and get control of this, the peaceful protesters can have their voice heard. You know, I think it's going to be similar to we need to take back our protest. The good people need to take back our protest, take back our streets so the voice can be heard. We're still assessing the property damage.
Okay, thank you. Of these, Mr. Chair, if I may, of these 138, how many were arrested on felonies?
I don't have the breakdown of that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Dingfelder, then Councilmember Vieira, and then Councilmember Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chief. Thank you to everybody in your department for your hard work during COVID, as well as in the last week or so. It's unfortunate. A lot of times people speak their 3 minutes and then they leave, and they don't think we're listening, and they don't think we hear them and we're responding. I do have a couple of questions that have arisen because of some of their statements. And some of these might come in the form of a motion later, but I appreciate the fact that you're here, so I'll go ahead and raise them. One of them, and Councilman Goods mentioned it a minute ago, in regard to diversity. I've heard that several years ago, we had a more diverse department, and for whatever reason, the diversity has dropped and that sort of thing. So my motion that I'll make later when Mr. Chairman lets me is, but I'll let you speak to it if you wish a little bit more, is if that's true, number one, and what sort of aggressive plans do we have to improve on that? You know, you can't, I don't believe in looking back, you know, and moaning and groaning about why, you know, what took us to where we are today, but what can we do moving forward to make the department more diverse? My second comment came out of watching former President Obama yesterday, and he spoke eloquently as always, but he spoke to the use of force policy, and he urged every community and every police department and every city council to review their use of force policy as compared to a use of force model policy that apparently he and a group that he'd been working with had been working on and researching and developing. So I pulled this morning, what I was doing on my phone, it was probably rude of me, but I pulled the section standard policy, your policy, section 536, which includes our use of force. And I'm just wondering if you would be amenable in working with the mayor and others, and maybe in the community and maybe us, to review that use of force policy to see how it does match up with some of these other model policies that are around the country.
Yeah, of course I would. I think that would be foolish on my part to not do that. I'd be more than willing to do that. I'm very comfortable with our use of force policy, and I think where there's a misnomer is I think people feel like the use of force policy was thrown out the window for the last 5 days, and it wasn't. It was just very difficult, fluid situations, and my concern is that the last 5 days has erased all the good that our police department does in the community. We have a wonderful relationship with our community. These last 5 days have pointed out some of the problems of our relationship, but it also goes across the nation. So yes, I'd be more than willing to do that. And as far as the hiring of minority officers, I don't know if the numbers have slipped. I know we have a strong push to hire more minority officers. I think we're going to struggle across the board to get anyone who wants to be a cop right now. What I've seen, you know, all walks of life screaming at our cops, calling us murderers and terrorists and everything else. You know, it wasn't right when they did it to the Vietnam veterans. It's not right for them to do it to our cops right now. You know, I tell you that I back our police officers and I stand against racism, and you can do both, and people should not be able to be afraid to do that. But we're working on improving our minority hiring plans, and I'm open to any feedback that anyone has.
And Chief, I appreciate that. I think I saw you on television saying that you were outraged by what happened in Minneapolis. I'm outraged by what happened in Minneapolis. That, you know, hopefully the jury will be outraged and see it for the murder that it was. You segued into my last question, which was one of the speakers, I don't know if you heard it, said, you know, some bad things happened on Tuesday night in terms of perhaps a little bit of excessive police force. I'm not judging, but as long as you're here, if you're comfortable responding to that, at this time, I'd ask you to speak a little bit Tuesday night. They talked about tear gas, rubber bullets, et cetera. And if you're not, we could follow up with just a more formal report at a later date.
No, it was, I was out there that night, and it was, you know, we're the guardians of the city, and, you know, we're gonna defend our city. I've said that from day one as the interim chief of police when I was dealing with a hurricane and then a serial killer, and I said from day one I would defend our city, and that's what we were doing. We were protecting and defending our city. It was not a good optic. It was ugly. You know, people would not leave. Were there people who maybe could not have gotten out of the crowd? I'm not naive to think that that's not true. You know, that went from a crowd of 300 to, I think we arrested 64, total 68, but 4 of them I think were at the interstate. We gave several dispersal orders. You know, they didn't leave. Some say that they could not get out. You know, sometimes defending your city is ugly. The optics of it all are ugly. But I do want you to know that I was there. I gave the order. It starts and stops with me. I'm responsible for it. It was disturbing to me. I called Mayor Castor and told her, I said, this is not what I want in my city. This happened on my watch. It's not my proudest moment. Although I think we did the right thing, it's not, just doing the right thing sometimes isn't the proudest thing in life. I called Sheriff Chronister first thing in the morning to get these people out of jail. How can we help process them? Not all of them went to jail. There were a few that we gave a notice to appear. I called Andrew Warren, our state attorney, and I called Julianne Holt, our public defender. And I said, how can I work with you guys to get these people out of jail? And, you know, we will work with the state attorney. We will work with the public defender's office to review these cases down the road. But now is not the appropriate time to really deal with that until we can get everything under control.
Thanks, sir. Thank you for
Thank you
your
very much.
service.
Councilman Vieira, and then we'll go to Councilman Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief Dugan, thank you for your words here today. I'll say this, that it's pretty darn easy for all of us, whether we're supportive or not, to sit up here and to talk with you about things, because we aren't out there on the streets, right? It's easy for me. It's easy for all of us to do that. Why there's so many questions and so much concern is for the issues that you've just brought up, which is what happened on Tuesday evening, and the specter of the First Amendment, which I know that you're obviously there on, that when folks are protesting apparently peacefully to a degree, again, there's a lot that is developing. We don't know. You're speaking about that. Maybe we'll get a report on that, et cetera. There could be troubling implications. I want to read, though, because Chief Dugan, you put out a statement on that I saluted you for about what's happening. You said, quote, "I've talked to many people who are angry, disturbed, and dismayed over the death of George Floyd. This incident doesn't make all cops bad, and it doesn't make you anti-police if you are outraged over this. Wanting cops to be held accountable doesn't mean you don't support the police. I sent you a text. I'll give you the PG version, but I said, well said, sir, proud to know you, hugs." And I still feel that way. Obviously, 110%. I think that your heart's always been in the right place. You're very blunt. You know what I mean? And you kind of get it out there, and I always appreciate that. But this incident does call into question, like Councilman Dingfelder said, and I said in the beginning as well, and a number of us have talked about the use of force policy, the crowd disbursement policy, and us talking about that. Because what ultimately was the result of maybe policies in effect that were followed by the men and women on the line could potentially use some change for the betterment of our city. Because you just indicated that you were, I believe it was, worried about a black eye. I don't want to put words in your mouth, or somebody said that, something to that effect. And I wouldn't want to see that happen to our city. And I would, if something were to have gone wrong 2 nights ago, to see policies that can remedy that, that can amend that. When former Representative Edna Rain spoke, I was very, very moved. I have a lot of respect for him, and I'll be darned if I would be dismissive of such passion. And I know you, being a good man, would also agree with that. There's the issue of Divya Kumar, the Tampa Bay Times reporter. Again, another issue that I would suggest would need some explanation. Just something that, again, just presumptively on the face of it requires scrutiny, explanation, et cetera, et cetera. I think we would all agree with that in that regard. Again, what our officers are going through every single day right now is very, 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 very difficult. And I think all 7 of us know that, which is you have men and women who leave their families every single day and go out there into situations that they don't know what they're going to be facing. And maybe sometimes there are policies in place that have negative results. And I think it's incumbent upon us to look at those policies to see how situations like that potentially can be avoided, tough situations. So those are my thoughts. Again, for me, the paramount concern that I have is the safety of our police officers and first responders, and also the First Amendment, which is when there are protests that are peaceful, and there are bad apples there, what way do police officers calm that down, address that? Are there different theories on that? I don't know. I'm just a lawyer and a politician. So I look for you all for guidance on that, and for this body and city for potential ways in which we can look at that. Because again, there is concern out there. We have to speak to that, certainly, and to look for ways that we can affect change in that. But I appreciate your words.
Yeah, I would expect, and thank you, I would expect that as these protests continue, which they will continue, I would think the good people are gonna start standing up and pointing out the bad apples and say that's not necessary, it's not productive. It's disappointing. I can tell you on Sunday, the Black Lives Matter march that I believe you were there, Councilman Goods. Several people were there. And I've been defending the Black Lives Matter movement because in Tampa, that is not a violent movement. There were families out there of all color. That they're anti-police brutality, not anti-cop. Now I'm not their spokesman, but that's the vibe I've always got from them. That got hijacked at the end, and I can tell you there were people who told us in the crowd, there are a bunch of kids out here who have guns. And they tried to set a tire on fire. They broke into a grocery store at 22nd and MLK, and it got a little ugly out there. But I was not going to allow them to burn down the black community. I'm not going to allow any neighborhood in this city to be burned down. I will not stand by idly whatsoever and allow that type of behavior to happen. Unfortunately, it's just not always a good optic. So, but I appreciate your comment.
And yes, sir, and if I may, Mr. Chair, I think it would be incumbent, and you know this, to continue to have dialogue in the community. A number of people have called me who are good people, who were genuinely troubled by what happened 2 nights ago, and that requires dialogue, that requires potential change. Heck, just a couple hours ago, I talked about things that I could have done better in the last 3 years as a city councilman. And I said, to the extent that I could have done more on those issues, which I could have, I'm sorry. And sometimes we need to amend and reflect, et cetera, whenever it comes to policy. And I think that comes through dialogue. And I know you're a man of dialogue, and I look forward to helping in that regard, because I think that, again, the voices that we've heard of from what happened on Tuesday evening do bring up some seriously troubling issues, which can hopefully be amended through dialogue, and potentially, to the extent that procedure needs to be changed, through the reform in that regard. So we can talk about that, and I'll look for input from my colleagues, especially Councilman Goods, in that regard. Thank
Well,
you.
and Tuesday night is troubling because after 8 hours and 8 miles of marching and assisting people to walk down from downtown to the Fox 13 studios on Kennedy Boulevard, all the way to back downtown, and throughout downtown, we had protests over in St. Pete, we had protests in Riverview. The mayor lifted the curfew because we thought we had everything back under control and wanted to give peaceful protest an opportunity. And as those other protests in other cities ended, well, Tampa's still doing it, let's go there. And that's what happened, and it just did not disperse. And, it's gonna be there's gonna be a long checklist of people that your chief of police is gonna have to sit down and have some awkward conversation with, and a lot of people will be there.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Councilman Carlson?
I just want to start by thanking you and your colleagues. I've thanked you all at every meeting that we've had that we have been going through this pandemic, and you all and other first responders have been putting your lives on the line, protecting us from coronavirus, and now you're protecting protesters who I think we agree that they have a First Amendment right to speak, and appreciate you protecting them and protecting homeowners as well. I know last night I was on the phone with you and also with neighbors in South Tampa, where there were it was pouring down rain, and your officers were out there in the rain helping the protesters and helping the neighbors, and that does not go unnoticed and is very appreciated. And so just for any officers watching, thank you so much for all you're doing. If you look at the tampascorecard.com, Tampa does very badly on most economic measures, but one thing that we do well is we have one of the lowest violent crime rates in the state. And so something is working in what you all are doing, and we don't want to, I remember, what was it, the early 90s when all the cars were getting stolen? I mean, there were things like that happening, and you all have stopped that. And I think most of our citizens are happy that we don't have a high violent crime rate. I listed some things earlier. Some had to do with the police. Most of them didn't. I, for the most part, hold the elected officials accountable, and now I'm one. And so, the elected officials, that in this case the city council and the mayor, set the tone for the police and every other department. We set the rules and guidelines for the department, and the buck stops with us if something happens. If we could have done something to prevent something bad from happening, then it's on us. And there were several things that were mentioned earlier, but and I think we've all been inundated with different recommendations. There's one group that has a list of 8 things that the police should do, and there are other groups that have 10 lists and all kinds of things that they think we should put into place. And I'm not prepared to make any motions on any of that today. Maybe my colleagues are. But one thing I would recommend is similar to the Bayshore meeting we had. I think at some point, maybe it's a week from now or 2 weeks, or maybe it's a couple months from now, but we ought to have some kind of forum where you're there, the PBA is represented, and we bring the community together to listen. We need the legal department there to talk about what we are doing. It could be that many of the things that people are asking for are already on the books. With the implicit bias training, there's a slight difference between what the community wants and what you all are already doing, and I think we're trying to bridge the gap there. But on the other things, I think first you all should get credit for, and the prior councils should get credit for whatever we already have done, and then we ought to really listen to the public and understand what else we think we need to do, but listen to the PBA and the police. When I was on the Charter Review Commission, and the community came out and said we need implicit bias training, the PBA said don't single us out, and so we passed it for all employees of the city, not just the police. And I think that, the feedback from everybody is important. And instead of dealing with this piecemeal council meeting to council meeting, I would rather see us at some point have a longer conversation about it, where the community come out and talk, and you all can. We can have a dialogue and we can listen, and from that, hopefully, we would get some constructive policy recommendations that we can implement as a result of it. Because, as you said, there's more than one voice. There are lots of voices. We need a dialogue. More than ever, we need a dialogue in our community, and we need to come up with concrete solutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Miranda?
Thank you. You know, I listened to everyone here, and everyone had a lot of things that they were very concerned with and brought to our attention. And I remember one individual, the guy who was walking by the convention center, he stopped an officer, and he said, "Go inside, we got something to say." He came in. And what he said struck me right between my eyes. Why don't you have no one cops for 72 hours, see what happens? That's a stunning statement to make because it wakes you up. What would have happened if there's no cops for 72 hours?
Chaos.
Anybody answer that?
Chaos.
It'd have been chaotic. Instead of 130 arrests, you might have had 138 dead people. I'm not saying it would have happened, but it could have happened. When I look at these things like that, maybe what we ought to do to understand what police officers go through is have everybody that we can, all the community leaders, ride with the officers for just one night shift a month. Have people in the clergy, have people in the banking industry, have people from all of society. Instead of having all these committees, show them what we do. Not I, you do, and your police officers do. So they can really understand what it is. And a city has, like Mr. Councilmember Carlton said, one of the lowest crime rates in America. When that happens, and it hasn't happened, I think the people will understand what a uniform and a badge and an oath of office is to protect the citizen. Both sides of the citizenry, no matter who you are. Are we perfect? Of course not. Are you perfect? I don't think so. No one's perfect. But there's a lack of understanding today. We're reaction on reaction on reaction on reaction, and there is no action to the reaction. I really believe that if we start a program where chambers of commerce, bankers, from east side, west side, north side, every side, you get an understanding what's happening. All we do is read what is written or what we see on television. And now a story on television doesn't take 30 minutes. They go in and go out because they got another subject matter to do. So whatever part of that segment you saw, that's what you caught on to. And I don't see how this can be attained, but I think we should start a dialogue to have community leaders ride with the cops so that they understand what's going on. Some of us don't understand, including maybe even myself. Because what you men and women see on a daily basis, most of us don't understand because we don't see it. So when you don't see something, it's hard to solve. You men and women see it. We don't. At the end, we're the ultimate decision makers, along with the mayor. But we really don't see it. Maybe we ought to ride with the cops one day a month, see what happens, and understand what life is really about, and understand who's doing the right thing in marching, and they have the right to do that, and who's infiltrating it for the opportunity to do something else. It's not easy today living in a free country. But it's even harder to live in a country that's not free. In a free country, you have a chance to make change. In a country you have no right to make no change, you're never going to make change. You may throw it away in some areas where you'll be in Siberia for the rest of your life. We don't have that here. Thank God we don't. But we have to do something to understand what's happening. And most of us want to talk about it, but we don't want to be in the front line. I suggest that all of us ought to ride with a police officer one night a month and then come back and give a report. I'm through with committees. The committees didn't get elected, we did. So I'm open to all suggestions. Thank you.
Yes, we have, several programs with the Citizens Academy. I've invited members of council to that. Many people do ride-alongs, and, it is a different perspective, there's no doubt. And I think eventually more people will do that. but I think it's gonna take us some time right now. When I stood here and I listened to people today, and they accused, some of them were implying that cops are racist and stuff, and some of the anti-cop rhetoric that is going, right now, people are angry and they're closed-minded, and they accuse us of judging them because of the color of their skin, but yet they have no problem judging us by the color of our uniform. And so until we can break down those walls and have cooler heads, but I think it's always good to get people to come along with us and see it from a different perspective. So I appreciate that.
Later on, we'll make a motion about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've done ride-alongs, not too many, but over the last 10 years, several times through different parts of the city. The most recent one was last fall. I've ridden along with the fire department, and you either get nights where there's nothing going on and somebody may have run a stop sign. Another time with the fire department, we walked into a home of a woman whose son, the son just found her dead. She was sick, but on the couch, TV on, the dirty dishes in the sink. I mean, life just stops. And you have to ask yourself, the trauma, the psychological, trauma that officers or firefighters deal with day in and day out because of all they see. Right before I was with the fire department, the shift began, somebody with a heroin overdose and giving them Narcan, on the side of Florida Avenue. I mean, it's just, and this is daily. Daily, you don't know what to expect. I appreciate the comments that Councilman Miranda made, saying that maybe we should and community leaders should ride along with the police and maybe the fire department just to get a better understanding. It gave me a better understanding. I did the Citizens Police Academy, and the scariest thing that I found of everything wasn't the car chase scenario. It wasn't firearms. It wasn't a taser. It was traffic stops, because you don't know what to expect. And officers do those day in and day out. And it's scary both for the driver and for the officer because, again, every scenario is different. I mentioned earlier in my comments this morning of, going out and being with the individuals that were expressing themselves, these last few days and being there Tuesday night before all the mayhem. Why? Because I wanted to put myself in their shoes in whatever capacity, just to see it for myself. One thing is watching it on the news. One thing is coming to some kind of judgment, reading a quote in a newspaper, but to be there yourself and to see it and witness it, then you get a better understanding. Beyond Tuesday, I walked all through downtown from Franklin Manor to City Hall, and there were officers all over the place, but they were organized. Again, this is earlier in the evening. Organized, they were there. They weren't looking for trouble from what I saw. They were doing their job, standing by. But I appreciate the comments, and I think, community leaders having ride-alongs, having more interactions beyond coffee with a cop, situations which are promoted, which are great. But see, what goes in and day out, sitting in that squad car. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Any other comments? No? All right.
If I could just say something else, please, if that's all right.
Sure, go ahead.
I think it's important that my community hear this. I've heard a lot of, inundated with phone calls and comments and everything, and I've had various press conferences that people clearly have not watched. And they don't understand that I support Black Lives Matter. And the fact that people think that Black Lives Matter, that's not their problem. That's my problem, that they think they don't matter. As your chief of police, it's something that I have to address. It's something that I have to fix. And I will do that, and I will listen. And I hear all these comments from people, and I think that's been our biggest problem in our nation, is that we want to tell people of color how they should feel and how they should think. When they raised a fist, we called them militant. When they sat on a bench during the national anthem, we called them unpatriotic. Then we criticized them for taking a knee. But yet we don't have any problems that when they're playing the national anthem, they still sell beer, and that people are taking selfies. And but I guess that's not disrespectful. I don't, I'm starting to get emotional. I apologize. But I see things from a different optic, from a different view. And we have to stop judging each other. And I assure you that I will take this step, but I need peace in our city so that we can all work together. We have to stop telling people how they should think and how they should feel and start listening.
You nailed the nail on the head there with what you said, and that is that we need to listen. We can't tell them what to think, And that's the thing. Somebody asked me yesterday, why are you so quiet all the time? And I go, it's not that I'm quiet, it's that I'm observing and listening, because sometimes it's not my place to talk. I don't know somebody's pain. I don't know what they're going through, and I don't know what they're thinking. So my job is to listen, and that's exactly what you said. You know, we're here to listen, you know, to what are your concerns? How can we do better? And I see that, you know, in your support and your words today is you want to build a better relationship with the community. And that's it. And it's all about communication. And I think you're doing the right thing, and I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
All right. Chief Bennett.
Thank you, Chairman. John Bennett, Chief of Staff. Before Chief Dugan leaves, I think it's important that we take an opportunity on the staff reports to walk on an agenda item for body-worn cameras.
Yes, sir.
So if Chief Dugan may want to explain just how we got into the financial picture, and then I can explain how the mayor and Chief Dugan and our CFO, Dennis Rajera, have worked together to have an opportunity to bring something on the council agenda item today that if that passes, then we would be able to move forward with the procurement that had started prior to the COVID budget risk factors.
So what happened is, if you all recall, we started an RFP quite some time ago, and it's taken some time. We had body-worn cameras. We had 60 of them for several years, and we could have kind of just piggybacked off that contract. But when you expand it, I thought it would have been irresponsible of us not to do an RFP, because you're doing a much larger contract, and you're trying to bundle several different packages to save money. And then when the COVID hit, you know, it was obviously we had to take a hard look on what we were purchasing, what we hadn't purchased, and that's when I recommended to the mayor that we just hit the pause button to figure out what was going on with that purchase. It's a big commitment. It's $1.5 million a year. It may end up being more down the road, and it would have been irresponsible, in my opinion, for us not to hit the pause button. But Mayor Castor has been able to juggle some different things, and now we're ready to move forward with the body-worn camera system. I don't think it's the end-all, but I think it would give different perspective. It would help build the trust that we have in our community with our police department.
Thank you very much. You know, there's a lot of information, misinformation out there, especially on social media. People were saying, you know, Tampa City Council votes down unanimously, May 21st, you know, body cameras, but they did approve tasers. And it's headlines like that with little substance, because it was 2 paragraphs, that started getting people riled up. And over I've had to explain what council did, what the administration did, and once they understood, people, you know, the message changed. Life March 1st to life now is completely different. If you would have mentioned things would be how they were with COVID-19 situation and whatnot, and now this, nobody would have believed it, because I wouldn't have, the magnitude of where we're at. But because of the COVID-19 situation, the financial impact that we really are not completely certain with the city of Tampa, I understand that things were not canceled, they were postponed. Let's wait a few months, because we don't know what's coming. We have a budget that we need to balance. So thank you for clarifying it. I've said this story 100 times these last few days. You know, city council never voted down body cameras. It was put on hold for a little bit, a few months. Now it's being prioritized. Why? Because we can get back on track with the help of all the work of the finance department and our CFO and whatnot, because of the financial impact. Body cameras are important. They're great. There's nothing wrong with accountability. Another council member says, trust and verify. I hear it all the time. And it's true. You trust the police, you verify. You trust elected officials, you verify. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with accountability. And if that's what it takes to begin with more body cameras, you know, we go that route, and that's what we're doing. So the vote that we will be taking, so it's clear, is to move forward with that funding that's been allocated for the body cameras, so the public knows that that is what it is, because, you know, there were several news reports that were incorrect. So, Councilman Dingfelder.
Thank you. Chief, just one comment, one question. I'm thrilled that the body cameras have come back, that staff and our financial folks have figured out a way to pay for them. And I think, I would say now more than ever, because what body cameras do, and they're supported across all sides of the aisle. The ACLU supports them. I think police generally support them. I'm glad that you do. but they do create, I think, more trust in the community, because instead of he said, she said, who knows what happened, there's a picture and maybe some audio to actually tell us. My question is, I was reading the policy associated with this. I assume it's probably been in place since we had the earlier, 60 cameras. I'm just wondering what the origin of the policy was, and have we updated it or reviewed it since we had the earlier program in place?
Yes, it's been reviewed. I've updated it myself. Forgive my memory, it's been a bit of a blur. It was about a year ago that I fired 3 police officers for manipulating the body-worn cameras that they had. And I have expanded the use of when they're expected to turn on the body-worn camera, so it has been updated.
What was the original origin of the policy? Did we write it ourselves, or did it come from?
What we do is we take other model policies from the Florida Chiefs of Police, the Police Executive Research Forum, and International Association of Chief of Police, and then also the Major City Chiefs Association that I'm part of just by being the chief from a major city. And we look at policies, model policies from other agencies, and then we kind of incorporate it as to what we think best suits our department and our community. Not every community has all the same issues.
I'm sure that once we get it out on the street with hundreds and hundreds of them, it will be a learning curve for us, and I'm confident you'll continue to revisit the policies and practices.
Yeah, we're gonna have to be flexible. Our cops gonna have to learn to use them. I would expect there will be some times where they may forget to actually turn them on, but there's some other safeguards in place that they will, on certain times, they will be automatically activated.
Thank you, sir.
Any other council members? Councilmember Goods?
Chief, how soon will the new policy come out?
The policy's in place.
So, okay, so the current, you've already updated, it's in place now. Just want to make sure that the community knows that, and I haven't read the new policy, but my understanding is that the policy now is that camera's on all the time with contact. Is that correct?
No,
Is that correct?
it just depends on the situation.
Okay.
We do have to protect certain victims' identities and
Okay.
things like that.
That was what I was going to ask, because that was brought to my attention, so I wanted to make sure. Thank you, sir.
Anybody else? Councilman Carlson?
Yeah, I just want to thank all the people in the community who responded to this and asked us to go back and change the policy. As difficult as some of the comments were, that's what we're here to do. And it's good to hear from the public. I would rather hear more from the public than less, because that means we're paying attention to what they're saying. And the community asked us very strongly to bring this back. And we know when it came forward before that the police department and the PBA, everybody's in favor of this. The mayor was always in favor of it. So I'm glad that it came back. But I want to say thank you to everybody in the public. This shows that when you speak out, that people do listen. And in particular, I want to thank Chief Bennett and Chief Dugan and anybody else who worked on this. I know I was on the phone and texting them regularly over the last week, and probably my colleagues were doing the same thing as we were hearing from the community. And I mean, this is how government should work. Thank you also to Mr. O'Hara and others in the financial department that made the numbers work. But this is the kind of responsive government that the public wants, and I hope we can continue to be responsive on other issues. So thanks to everybody.
Thank you very much. Any other Councilman Miranda?
Although I'm very supportive of the body cameras, there could be some unintended consequences. And I was talking to 2 officers a few minutes ago, and here's a scenario that was brought up. If you walk into an apartment, let's say there's 2 kids fighting, and the mother's trying to separate them, and she's having a little problem, and they're both from the same family, they're blood brothers and sisters, and she calls the cop comes, and he talks them out of whatever situation, and just by the mere presence of a police officer, it comes down to the situation. There was no body camera. Now the same scenario with a body camera, there's a fight going on, what happens? Who gets arrested? There's a cause for arrest. But the police officer without the body camera solved that problem. Now what happens? I'm not asking you, I'm asking everyone. Because that's a scenario that was brought up to me, I don't have an answer. But there is a dispute, there is a fight going on. So what I'm trying to say is, how do you solve a problem like that? I don't know. And I'm supportive of the body camera. I'm not trying to put you in the spot, I'm not asking you to answer the question.
Look, you put me in the spot, I'm used to it, and I appreciate
You and I have
that.
the same head, okay?
Yeah, but I'm much better looking. But the issue is, I agree with you. But my answer to that, and I appreciate you looking out for the cops. That's important. And I'm going to put myself out on an island here with my cops. I know they know that I support them, but they're probably not going to appreciate this comment that I'm about to make. The landscaping of policing has changed dramatically in the last 5 days. And if there's a police officer in the city of Tampa that does not want a body-worn camera, then I suggest you turn your badge in. Because we cannot have that anymore. It has changed. Whether it's good or bad or not, it's changed.
And I agree with you, I think everyone agrees with you, because the system has changed. The idealism has changed. The courts have changed. I hope they change for the better. So these are the things that are going on, but I support the body cameras from day one. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
And the body-worn cameras aren't going to fix all.
I understand
You've
that.
discussed it this morning. The police department, the criminal justice system is not going to fix the problems that we discussed today. It's not just the police.
Thank you
Chief,
very much.
Mr. Chair.
Councilman
one last one.
Good.
Are the cameras the same type that St. Pete has, or this a different model? I know this company, Axon, they sent me an email about the system, whatever, but is it the same system St. Pete has, or is it different?
I don't know what they have. I know
I think
I've
when I put a
contacted
gun-
the chief. I've spoke to Chief Holloway, I spoke to the Sheriff Cronister, and, you know, most people end up going with Axon. I don't know what they ended up going with.
Okay, I think when the gun is pulled, something like that, it cut the cameras on. or
Yeah,
something
the
like
one we have, if your gun is pulled, your taser's pulled, we're eventually gonna be able to hook it up if your lights on your police car are activated. And if one is activated, anyone within a certain distance will activate the other ones. Now, that'll be problematic too, so it's the unintended consequences, but we'll work through it.
that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair,
Councilmember Vieira.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Just two things. We've talked about community support for this. Just through my interactions with the public, I've been encouraged by, as of recently, the widespread support that there is for body cameras, especially when you take a look where it was 2 or 3 years ago. I have a lot of friends who are more on the conservative political spectrum who are strongly supportive of it. Those on the left as well, those in the center, and those who aren't into politics, but they just think it just makes sense. So I've always been encouraged by that. You know, I think the big lesson for us in terms of how we are now jumping to support this at this movement, and mind you, something that the administration has been supportive of. Jane Castor ran on this, on having body cameras, et cetera. But what we're doing here today is that let's look into the future on the challenges that can come up in this area and be proactive and not reactive. And I think some of the things we've talked about here today get us to that. So I think that's a challenge for us, especially as a government body, for all of us, starting with me. Thank you.
And I think what you're gonna see with body-worn cameras, you're gonna see all the good that our cops do. People are gonna be shocked. It'll be, instead of needing to go on a ride-along, you can go to YouTube and see all the good that we do.
Thank you very much. Councilman Citro.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief, I too, like Councilman Miranda and the rest of our council members, are in support of the body cameras. There are certain times, correct me if I'm wrong, that the camera is recording even though the officer doesn't hit it or turn it on. 30 seconds prior?
Yes.
There's going to be some unforeseen consequences because these editing is not allowed. And this is all public record. So if a police officer is looking at a document or looking at their computer, there is information that might not be public, such as names, addresses, those types of things. Although I am in support, we're going to have to be very careful that information that shouldn't be getting out gets out. It's all public record. Number two, I'm hoping you're going to nod your head yes. That's correct, Councilman. Number two is, my question was always storage. It's not necessarily the price of the cameras that are the most expensive, it's the storage. Have we been able to negotiate that since 3-4 months ago?
Well, it went out the request for a proposal, so no, once we got that, you know, that was the best price. If I understand your question right, but yes, you know, that was part of the negotiation, was the request for proposal, because you're right, the equipment, just like anything else, it's not as expensive as much as the storage is, and this video that is required, especially with some of our more complicated cases, there are certain retention periods that need to be done and things like that.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your comments. I appreciate what you said. If, you know, an officer doesn't like it, they can turn in their badge. You know, it's a very powerful statement. Having a body camera should be as natural as putting on your seatbelt in a car. It's for everybody's safety. That's it. And that's what it comes down to. So having said that, I don't see any other comments or questions. Mr. Shelby, this is now a resolution that we vote on.
Martin Shelby, City Council Attorney. Yes, it's a walk-on, and I believe the resolution has been provided to City Council.
Has everyone seen the resolution?
Move the resolution.
Wait,
If I may inquire, does the clerk have a copy of the resolution?
Councilman Dingfelder.
I don't seem to
I don't have a copy of the resolution.
specifically.
It's on the addendum. The basics are $952,545 to be reappropriated for the body-worn camera program per Mr. Rogero, CFO. Yep. Can we do a roll call vote on this? I know it's typically not necessary, but, all right. So who made the motion? Councilman Miranda?
I second the motion.
Who seconded it? Who was the second?
Citro.
Citro? All right. Roll call vote?
Vieira,
Yes.
Goode,
Yes.
Dingfelder,
Yes.
Maniscalco,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
Citro,
Yes.
Miranda.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
All right, so again, to clarify, that was $952,000, almost $1 million for the body-worn camera program. That was just unanimously passed by City Council. Thank you very much. All right, Chief Bennett.
Thank you, Chairman. We have 3 other things on the staff report that we need to cover. The first one I'll move, and then I'll be able to turn the microphone over to Ms. Carol Post to cover the final 2. But the first one was, I know we've been anxiously awaiting for our Sustainability and Resilience Officer as the mayor's 5th advisory program comes together. We know that the other 4, workforce development, development services, transportation, and housing affordability, have reached a point of recommendations and action plans. However, we've been looking forward to this 5th dimension that's going to be all-encompassing, and I'll let Ms. Post talk about that in detail. But in the meantime, we want to introduce our, as council had asked for, our new Sustainability and Resilience Officer, Mr. Whit Reamer, and I'd like to give him the microphone for a few minutes to give you a brief background on him, and then you can ask any questions. Whit?
Thanks, Chief, and it's my honor to be before you today, Council, and to be a part of this administration and work for the people of Tampa, work for City Council, and for this great mayor that has really prioritized sustainability and resilience as part of her T3 program. You know, when I was talking to Chief Bennett and a lot of the folks that work for the city about this opportunity, I said something along the lines of, I feel like everything I've done in my life has set me up for this opportunity in a really positive way. I've worked in environmental law, I've worked on environmental justice issues, which really have an important undertone with the discussions that we've had here today. I'm passionate about water resources, renewable energy, green space for every person in Tampa to be able to get outside and have access to clean air and clean water. And the environmental side is going to be there, the sustainability side is going to be there, and the resilience side. And again, resilience, by definition, is the ability of a community to respond to, adapt, and bounce forward from shocks and stressors of all types. And I know Ms. Post has got some remarks prepared in that regard. But I'm really honored to be here before you. I'm ready to get to work, and I look forward to working with each of you on your ideas for your neighborhoods, your districts, your communities, and the people that we all work for to make Tampa a sustainable, vibrant, healthy place for us now and for generations to come. So thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Welcome aboard, Councilman Goods.
You know, when we bring on new people, a lot of times people don't really know what they really do. Glad you kind of curtail a little bit of that of what you're going to be doing. But I guess I have to ask, where are you starting at first?
Where, I'm sorry.
Where are you starting at? Where are you going to start your work at first?
Great. Well, I know that the council has approved a plan to start talking with neighborhoods about things that they feel like they are missing that fall in my my realm. So we're going to be working with a group called the Resilient Cities Catalyst, which is a spinoff, and they have of the Rockefeller Foundation, who has done a lot of really good work in cities, large and small, economically challenged and prosperous. And what we're going to do is we're going to develop, I'm going to say plan, because we are going to develop a plan, but we're really going to develop a framework about how to get all the voices from neighborhoods around Tampa to talk about the issues that matter most to them. And each neighborhood and each community have different priorities that fall under the sustainability and resilience space. Like I mentioned, in one area of the city, that might be me working with the stormwater department to help reduce property flooding. In other parts of the city, it might be that they don't live within a quarter mile of green space or a park, and maybe we have got some parcels of land owned by the city that we can make into a new green space. So my first thing, and it kind of echoes what we've heard today, is going to be doing a lot of listening and a lot of learning. Now, I've moved back to Tampa 3 years ago, but I've got a whole lot of neighborhoods I haven't been to and a whole lot of folks I'd like to go out and learn what their priorities are for this position. That's going to be my first thing, is going to be to listen, and then we're going to hopefully put all those comments into a plan that ties a lot of the 4 other working groups together, and then this will be the 5th kind of base one, and we're really going to take that forward. And it might be solar panels here on the convention center, it might be green space, it might be stormwater flooding. We're going to take a comprehensive look at the city.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Councilman Carlson.
Welcome aboard. I'm really happy to have you. First of all, thank you to the mayor and Chief Bennett for creating this position. It's one of the areas that we've, I think, had some of the most questions about before these before these crises. And it's a very important position in our community. And as they went through who might come on board, I was very happy to see that you were there. It's one of the people that I would have turned to before to ask questions, and now I will continue to do that if he has any time. But he's also been very deeply involved in the community, and I look forward to him bringing all those community contacts. And most importantly, I can't wait to hand off all those questions to you.
Look forward to working at your pleasure, Councilman.
Thank you very much. Chief? That was it?
Thank you for the opportunity. Look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, Council, thank you. We have 2 other staff agenda items remaining. However, I do know that I believe 1 item has been pulled and 1 item was requested to be pulled, so that could actually increase the staff engagement up to 4 items. So if Mr. Shelby wants to talk about, not now, but make sure we cover those staff items that were pulled. I don't know if you want to keep all of this in staff reports together. So before we get to that, and specifically, I know item 3 was requested, and I think item 21 was requested for some staff engagement. So
For item number 3, I believe Councilmember Carlson wanted to continue it to a
I just wanted, I don't know if you want to vote on that now. I just wanted to continue it for 2 weeks, and we can talk about it if you want, but I wasn't asking for any kind of discussion about it.
Okay, well, then can we get a motion to continue item number 3 and just get it out of the way?
So moved.
The next
And-
regular
and
council meeting will be the
Mr.
25th.
If I may ask, I mean,
Yes.
just to make sure the purpose of this, I mean, the administration, if this continues for 2 weeks, is there any public safety ramifications? I mean, I'd like to know before voting on it.
yeah, I was hoping this would be addressed while Chief Dugan was still here, but in his stead, and of course, you know my 30-year history in the police department and over 30 years as a trainer, Item 3 is part of the in-service training supply chain, if you will. And a lot of their training has been delayed from COVID. So delaying this 2 weeks and then doing the procurement process and the delivery is probably going to be a month. And then now you're going to be in peak hurricane season. We know we've already had at least 2 storms out there. High liability training is critical. There's several categories, everything from ethics to implicit bias, all the things, but it also involves the hands-on training. This could have an impact on their training sequence. I understand the timing, things happen, but it's very important as an instructor for many years in all of these categories that the police department get this supply item while it's been negotiated and ready to deliver, so they can get on with their in-service training and have no setbacks. Not to mention, this is a state requirement. This is not just a TPD policy that invokes that training at the police academy out on 34th Street.
And if I may inquire, I mean, Councilman Carlson, not to look into your rationale, but I mean, is there some reason? I mean, could you explain? Because again, I have no dog in this fight. I'm just curious. I mean,
Yeah, I just
why?
think, I think the timing of it is bad. The community is asking us to relook at all of these policies, and I think we need to take a couple weeks at least to reflect. I did have a conversation with Chief Dugan last night about it and traded messages with Chief Bennett. I would wish Chief Dugan was here, but last night anyway, he seemed to indicate to me that a 2-week delay was not something that would delay any processes. I think originally I talked to him about maybe a month delay, but then in the conversation I thought about making a 2-week delay. If you all want to, just to my colleagues, if you all want to not have a 2-week delay, you can vote that down, and then I'll just ask to have it pulled out, and I'll vote against it. I don't want to vote against it because I know we need supplies for the police, but I don't. Based on my conversation with Chief Dugan, it didn't seem like a 2-week delay would be important. And I think it would be respectful for the community right now if we did that.
Well, Councilman Goods.
Yeah, I know in-service training is very important to the officers, especially when you're talking about their weapons and the ammunition. But I'm going to have to concur with Mr. Carlson. With everything that's going on right now and the pulse of the community, we just got the body cameras moving forward. I think maybe, I don't think it's going to hurt us too bad to wait a couple of weeks till things die down, bring it back. But I think if we move this today, I just think you're going to hear a lot of stuff in the community knowing that we're in a situation right now. So I can support 2 weeks. So we'll just see how the vote goes. But I'm just looking at the pulse of the community right now.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Vieira.
Thank you, sir. I would like to hear from Chief Dugan on this. Again, I have no problem with a 2-week delay on this, et cetera. I just want to make sure what we're voting on. Is there any way that he can call in for questions?
I can move him to the back of the staff report, see if I can get him to come back.
All right, so
or call. I don't.
Yeah.
Would that be okay,
Yeah,
Councilman
we'll
Carlson? Would
go on to other stuff and then revisit this in a few minutes.
because I have no problem with it. I just want to make sure.
Okie dokie, go ahead,
Great.
sir.
Yeah, so the last 2 items, and again, in the depth of it, I'll let Ms. Carol Post, our administrator over development and economic opportunity, cover both item 36 and the One Tampa Relief Program, which has a walk-on item to increase the funding, and I'll let her explain the parameters of those opportunities to you, and I'll reach out to Chief Dugan in the meantime. So, Ms. Post.
Good afternoon. Carol Post, Administrator for Development and Economic Opportunity. Thank you for having an opportunity to appear before you. On the One Tampa item, I'll address that item first. As the Chief of Staff said, we had a walk-on item. I think all of you are aware the ways that we've been attempting to provide emergency relief to our community in the wake of the COVID emergency. And we have made a number of attempts to provide the most essential and basic needs to fill gaps that we knew were hitting upon of our residents. And in short order, we were able to produce through the use of our HUD funds and the generous support of our CRA funds through to provide rent assistance and utility assistance to individuals as well as to small businesses in designated geographical locations that were constrained by the use of restricted funds. And in doing that, we know that we helped many individuals who were in need, and we continue to do that. We've had our individual program underway for a month now with hundreds of individuals who have had their rent paid and utilities reimbursed directly to them. Similarly, our business relief program that was launched a few weeks ago has made progress, and the second series of that business relief program, which is currently underway, has continued to advance that cause of providing the most vulnerable individuals and businesses in our community with the most essential needs that they would need. What we found, though, is that within those constrained geographical locations, which again were dictated by the use of the funds that we had, we left a swath of the city out in terms of providing relief or being able to obtain relief. So at its simplest form, this request is our ability to move forward funds that do not have those constraints. They are unrestricted dollars. It would allow us to then launch a citywide relief program that would be available. It would not be restricted by geographical locations. It would also not be restricted to businesses of a certain size or with a certain number of employees, nor would they have a limitation relative to the number of years in service. We know, in fact, specifically smaller businesses that may be just starting up are in just as much need as more established businesses. Again, this gives us some opportunity because of the different nature of these funds to be able to have wider latitude. So there is criteria associated with it to ensure that these are businesses that were in fact affected by COVID. So you know, some businesses are actually thriving because of COVID. It's created a whole cottage industries. So we're not looking to help businesses that are still prospering. But for those that have been critically impacted because of the COVID or because of the governor's shutdown requirements, this would give us some latitude to have the relief provided to a wider swath of businesses. I see Councilman Goods grinning. So.
There must have was an angel in the room when y'all convened about this or something, you know. But
so that's in short. Again, we had expressed this from the outset that the use of our HUD money and our CRA money both constrained us to some extent. This gives us much more latitude, and we look forward to being able to provide a more expansive use of relief across our community.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any questions? No? Councilman
let
Goods.
me say this, you know, I always say don't say what we can't do, but what we can do. I appreciate the effort of going back, revisiting, and however it got revisited, who all else was at the team to bring some other ideas. I want to say thank you. This is what the people need. Again, never say what we can't do, but what we can do. So obviously we found a way to do something for everybody. My other two colleagues in the South Tampa area and the at large had talked about everyone turning, and I'm just glad we were able to find a way now to give everybody. We still may not can help everybody, but we made the effort to try to get as close as we can to help everybody we can. So let me just personally say thank you for your work.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Goods. All right. Chief Bennett, I see Chief Dugan here.
Mr. Chairman.
And Mr. Shelby has a question.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, with regard to this item, I believe this is item 10. Did you want to move this now?
We would not
Or is it on the consent docket?
walk on.
It's a walk-on in addition to item 10.
I think it's,
Is it a substitute resolution?
it looks
or a
like an
different
amendment to item 10.
Okay. What would be the appropriate time to take care of it? At 10, right?
All right.
May
And
I-
Councilman.
Yes, ma'am.
May I make one comment just before you move forward with it? It's just to respond, and as I said, our desire to be much more expansive. I just want to caution on the word of helping everyone in that, again, it's a limited set of funds. And our desire is to help at least 100 businesses in each council district so that we have some equity.
First come,
across
first
as
serve.
well, and on a first come, first serve basis, exactly. Thank you.
All right.
And if I may, just.
Yes, Councilman.
Thank
Yes,
you, sir. Just really quick, and this would obviously include assistance for businesses that were adversely affected by looting, correct?
It has been our desire, I mean, obviously that surfaced after the fact, but we'd very much like to include that in the package, in the plan.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Mr. Shelby, what do you say we just move this resolution?
I don't know whether it's in the form of a resolution. Is it in the form of a
As,
resolution?
well, as item number 10, or we can just wait to go back, since discussion is
My
exhausted.
suggestion, this is a walk-on item. My suggestion for the purposes of the clerk is to move the walk-on as presented by the administration. As
All right.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move item 10 as amended in the addendum.
Second?
Wait,
I'm sorry, if you can, I just want to clarify this so the clerk is prepared with. I just want to make sure this is not. I just want to be clear that this is not a substitute resolution.
Good afternoon, Council. Dennis Rajero, Chief Financial Officer. Yes, the memo slightly amends the resolution you have before you, appropriating the entirety of the $800,000 to the SUSI program, as opposed to the original resolution, which merely appropriated $400,000.
all right, so it's safe to say we can just move item 10, the resolution as
As amended.
as amended, okay?
That's my motion.
We have a motion from Councilman Dingfelder,
Second?
second from Councilman Goods, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Thank you very much. Anything else, Ms. Post?
Nothing further on that matter. Would you like me to address the last item?
We have Chief Dugan here for item number 3.
Oh,
I know it's
I'll
very,
defer.
very busy, and I just
I'll
wanted
defer,
to
of
give him
course.
the opportunity,
No
and then
problem.
we'll go right back. Chief Dugan, there were questions on item number 3.
Morning, Brian Dugan, Chief of Police.
Sorry. Yeah, the question that Councilman Vieira asked was, will this cause any, I'll paraphrase, any disruption in service? My understanding, tell me if I'm wrong, my understanding in speaking with you yesterday was that a 2-week delay would not cause any change in the schedule of the training. You were talking about the whole timeline of how everything's been delayed and everything, and it seemed like a 2-week delay wouldn't cause a problem.
No, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. One, I don't know why we wouldn't move forward with this purchase. I don't know what it would change. And I would so what are we trying to accomplish if we don't move forward with the purchase?
So as I said to my colleagues earlier, my reason for trying to postpone it is that I think it's disrespectful with the situation in the community right now. I think 2 weeks would give us more time to reflect on what the community has said. And I'm not against this, funding this as it stands right now, but I think approving any kind of budget item like this would be a bad time to do it. And I think we ought to wait 2 weeks. If it doesn't materially affect the process of training, then it seems like we could wait.
Well, the issue is we move it back and you have order times, delivery times, then we're getting, we are in hurricane season. I think people, I'm aware of the optics when you're the chief of police. I'm not a politician, but I do have to be politically astute. I think everybody knows we carry guns. I just don't see the value in it. I had thought about it, but I think we need to move forward because it is very important that we train. And that is what everybody is talking about, is how we train, what we're doing. And so I'm requesting that we continue to move forward. I don't think the delay is necessary.
Mr. Chairman, may I be heard? Martin Shelby.
Go ahead, sir.
My apologies, but looking at the calendar, your next meeting would be the 25th
Yes, sir.
of July, which is actually, I believe, 3 weeks.
June 25th,
June 25th, I'm sorry. The next regular meeting is June 25th.
Yeah.
Madam Clerk, could you? So that would be a 3-week continuance. I'm sorry for that.
Thank you. Who wanted to speak? Councilman Goods?
Chief, I know in-service training is very valuable to the office. Do we have enough ammo for in-service training for this 2-week period or 3-week period now that Councilman Carlson is asking?
Well, the issue is that every 2 years, we get new duty ammo, which we carry on the streets. We use certain ammunition because it's cheaper to train with, and then we carry other one, and now it's time to replace that. You know, like I said, we delay it 3 more weeks, then it's another 2 weeks for the order, the shipping. If there's a hurricane, that may get delayed. You know, I'm requesting that we keep moving forward. I think people are comfortable with the fact that cops carry guns.
All right. Councilmember Citro.
If I may, Councilman Maniscalco, if I may?
Oh, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Yeah, and that's what I wanted to inquire on, which is I totally understand what my colleagues are saying in that regard, but this is something for training, correct? For
Yes.
training. Yeah, I just don't see a rational a relationship between doing this and anything with the community. I mean, I'll tell you what, you talk about the community, I mean, I've been out at protests. I've been out talking to people. You know, those are things that I'm doing to stand in solidarity with the community. I'm passionate about that. Very, very, very passionate about that. I was out there on Saturday. I was out there on Sunday. I was out there on Monday. I'm passionate about that. This, I just don't see it. I think it's just, it's going to be 3 weeks delay. Other things could happen. I respectfully don't see it myself, but.
The other issue is, you know, we just passed body-worn cameras. We are going to have to be able to shoot our guns with body-worn cameras to make sure it doesn't throw off the Bluetooth. Does the Bluetooth activation when you draw your gun, is it gonna properly activate the body-worn camera? I'm just asking that you move forward. I know the optics are there. We've had the discussion, now everyone sees it. I'm not sure what we're trying to accomplish.
Councilman Citro.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief Dugan, will this interfere with any mandates that's been set down by the state of Florida as to training? Will this delay cause?
Yes, it will.
Okay,
You know,
thank
that's the issue.
Thank you very much, Chief.
All right. Having said that, any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, if I can, if we could just ask the clerk, is there a motion on the floor presently?
There was a motion made by Goose to continue the item, but I don't believe there was a second.
Councilman Goods, do you stand by your original motion?
I won't, because now what Chief is now saying that it's going to interfere with some of the state guidelines with officer certificates for in-service training. And if that's the case, then I think I'm going to have to go ahead and move forward with the vote of support of the ammo at this time.
All right, so there is no motion to continue then?
Yeah, so I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but I'd like to make a motion just to pull it out of the consent agenda.
No, this is going to be an individual vote. We can take it now, and then I'll just scratch it
Okay.
off. So, all right, all in favor, or who would like to move item number 3?
You want me to do a roll call vote?
Sure. Mr. Chair, that is on my committee, so I will move to move item number 3.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Councilman Miranda. Motion was made by Citro. Roll call vote.
Vieira.
Yes.
Goods.
Yes.
Dingfelder.
Yes.
Maniscalco.
Yes.
Carlson.
No.
Citro.
Yes.
Miranda.
Yes.
Motion carried with Carlson voting no.
Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you.
Ms. Post?
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
could I
sir.
say- Just to add on real fast, just again, to remind you and all the other officers out there, I support training, obviously, and I support having the tools and supplies for training. The only reason I voted against it is for the timing of it, and we respect my colleagues' decisions. And thank you for coming back and answering the question for us.
All right, Ms. Post.
Good afternoon again. Good afternoon again.
Thank
Am I
you,
on?
Chief.
Carol Post, Administrator for Development and Economic Opportunity. Thank you for the opportunity to address this item. We feel like this is a very important item. When the motion was made, thank you, when the motion was made a few weeks ago, and we appreciate the opportunity to come back to address it. And what I wanted to do is just take a few moments to provide some context for our response. And this reflects conversations that I've had with Councilman Carlson, who made the motion. And I hope that it reflects.
Point over, Mr. Chairman, are we on 36? Are we discussing
Yes.
36?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
we're back to it.
Thanks.
Good. I think it reflects our desire to work together to achieve common goals. And as we've heard today, there are many voices that want to be heard and need to be heard, and what we will propose is an approach that I hope will give a forum to those voices. So I'd like to use it as an opportunity to update this council on the number of initiatives that have been underway for the past year that we think coalesce with at least what we interpreted were the desires of the motion. So I'd like to read a summary response. So when the motion was made, we were a little surprised to hear it, but we were encouraged by the underlying goals. Specifically, the goals to increase economic growth and diversity, to reduce poverty, to improve the median household income, and work to end gender and racial income disparity. These goals actually directly dovetail with the mayor's Transforming Tampa's Tomorrow, or T3 initiatives. We've been focused on these for the past year. The goals in the motion are actually embedded in the T3 recommendations, which came as a result of 4 work groups meeting over the course of 4 months in 2019 with more than 65 individuals participating as team members. The T3 vision was announced just 2 weeks after the mayor took office in May of 2019, and it set forth a set of strategic priorities focused on transportation, development services, workforce development, housing affordability, and sustainability and resilience. So I'd like to take the opportunity to briefly reflect on that vision. It began last June with the launch of the Transportation and the Development Services work teams. It was followed shortly after by the Workforce Development team in July of 19 and the Housing Affordability team in early October. Each of those teams was convened with a diverse group of stakeholders who each had a demonstrated expertise or an interest in the subject area. Each group met for 90 days with objectives to recommend initiatives with measurable targets. The advisory teams had representatives from across our community, including academics, industry, trades, advocacy groups, labor, educators, small businesses, large businesses, economic development professionals, social service organizations, and gender and racial equity advocates. Every meeting was conducted in the sunshine, with public comment welcomed each time, and an online forum was set up for continuous feedback. In fact, several of the city council members here participated in some of those advisory team meetings, and I think that input was really valuable. Every aspect of the sessions were transparent and accessible. All meeting minutes and information are now cataloged as part of the T3 website, including the final reports and the recommendations, which are easily accessible. The work to carry out the advisory team recommendations is now underway. Transportation and Development Services were finalized in November. Housing affordability was published in mid-February, and the Workforce Development Report had been scheduled to be produced in early April. Unfortunately, it was temporarily sidelined by the COVID-19 priorities. However, on just this Tuesday, we published the Workforce Report, completing the plan that was laid out 1 year ago for these 4 work teams. The individual team members and the members of the public who participated invested a lot of their time to weigh in on the issues, the discussions, the review of the data, and the assessments that were done. One of our concerns with the motion is why we would want to do that again, particularly at a time when the entire community is strained by so many immediate challenges. So our first thought is that we'd like to stay on track with what's been started, and rather than start something new, we'd like to join efforts. We'd like to merge our concepts, merge our ideas, which I believe are consistent, and build momentum on the current activities rather than possibly dilute them by having separate paths. To achieve this, we'd recommend using the 5th advisory team to bring our objectives together. And that 5th and final advisory team, the Sustainability and Resilience team, which you heard Whit speak about, that officially began in December. That's when the City Council actually approved a contract for professional services with the Catalyst Group, the Rockefeller Foundation affiliate that Whit referred to. It's been our plan to follow Catalyst's playbook for this subject area. The reference to resilience is a platform that ties the threads of the 4 other advisory teams together. And we've talked about that with each of the advisory teams, and it's been included as part of the plan in each of those teams' final report. They knew, notwithstanding that we call it a final report, it really was a chapter of a book that will be put together under the rubric of the sustainability and the resiliency cover. So because of that, that team will also have a longer standing effort. It will endure throughout the remainder of the mayor's term. And I think it's important to note also that resilience is not just about climate change and its effects. It's about how a city drives social equity across its entire community and how it positions itself to effectively adapt to challenges across social, economic, and environmental issues. Whit referred to this already about that sort of very wide swath that is contemplated under the sustainability and resiliency overhaul. So this is why we believe that that effort aligns with the goals of the motion and why a separate committee or task force could be duplicative. We actually believe that the combined effect of the 4 subject matter advisory teams, connected by the mortar, as I've been known to call it, of the sustainability and resilience team, will result in a collective to address gaps in our community, including job creation, housing affordability, gender and racial disparities in employment and housing, and other socioeconomic related challenges, all of which are important building blocks of economic development, and each of which will be a critical part of this effort. An additional outcome of the effort will be metrics that effectively capture key social equity measures. The city currently publishes a performance dashboard that was developed some time ago, and we'll use that as a foundation to build and refine how we measure our performance and our progress in meeting these objectives. And lastly, as we've done throughout the advisory team works, we will rely upon existing data to guide our outputs. For example, the benchmarking data that was recently established by the Tampa Bay Partnership was a critical part of the Workforce Development Advisory Team's assessment. We know that having a clear sense of where our gaps are is the only way to effectively work to fill those gaps. So to conclude, we'd like to respond by making 3 recommendations. First, I think, is that we all agree on what we need to do. We just don't necessarily agree that we need a new committee to do it. We'd recommend that we merge our ideas and our objectives into the Sustainability and Resilience Group and ensure that that effort emphasizes the concepts that are set forth in the motion. And second is we would recognize that City Council is an important partner in these efforts, and we would recommend that as the Sustainability and Resilience effort is launched by the Catalyst Group, that the City Council appoint a council member or representative to participate in the process. And finally, as those performance measures start to come online, that we would bring those measures back to preview them with the City Council and ensure that we have appropriate input. A year ago, the administration set this goal for the T3 effort. And it was unknown to any of us at the time that we would be faced with these current unprecedented matters. The immediate health and safety of the citizens of this city with respect to coronavirus has been a prevailing concern, and followed quickly by the need to implement the safer at home policies, to run an adapted and quasi-virtual government operation, the need for the business relief efforts that we've had underway, the need to initiate safe and measured reopenings that we've had underway for our small businesses, and looking ahead, the need to look at working with the county related to the recently published joint city-county recovery recommendations. We still have a lot of work ahead of us to just get back to where we were in early March. But right now, we feel like we need to be laser focused on our immediate needs while we remain balanced on returning to our core mission. And we believe our approach that's recommended today will do that, and that it aligns with the goals of the motion and enables us to stay on track. So we'd seek council's support and appreciate the opportunity to share our response.
Thank you very much. Any council members have any questions, response? Councilmember Carlson.
Yeah, if I could, just for a minute, take everybody through what happened since the motion. Motion was made about a month ago. Within a couple days, Ms. Post and I had a conversation about it, and she raised concerns about the length of the process. Remember, originally, it's an economic advisory committee, not an economic development advisory committee, but an economic advisory committee that would continue on until we stopped it. So the idea is that we would get regular updates from this group. And she asked me to reduce the term of it, so I proposed, how about 4 to 6 meetings, and then at the end of that, and I outlined a process, and at the end of it, the community would give us feedback on the economy and what inputs we could have to the economy. I did that, and then the second thing that she requested was that she said staff is kind of tight at the city, and we'd like to, we really can't handle the process right now with everything going on. I said, well, how about if we find a third party that will partner with us? And so I called several third parties, and I have at least one offer from one organization, probably a couple other options of organizations that you'd like us to partner with. And I was right at the end of getting ready to officially request that we get some kind of proposal to work together, and I thought we were on the same page. And then I was requested to be in a meeting at 4:30 last night by phone, and in the 4:30 meeting, I heard what you all just heard. If you look at the staff report on this item, which is online still this morning, I printed this out this morning. It has the staff report, and it has the outline of the motion, and it says recommendation, and presumably it says the staff's recommendation, but it says recommendation, and underneath it says establish an economic advisory committee. I thought we were all on the same page until last night. I don't know what happened. One thing that did happen is that the community came out in force over the last week and told us in very strong ways that we have to bring equity to the community. And in any process that we have, I'm a junkie of reading economic development stuff, so I read all the T3 stuff. In any process we have that we engage the community, we can never possibly hear all the voices in the community, and so the more input we get, the better, because it shows that we're having a better dialogue and more connection with the community. So in this case, we're offering more dialogue, more input, more people to have seats at the table, diversity, and I proposed shortening the time of it, and also to have an outside group run it, and it wouldn't cost us anything. And so I don't see what the burden to the city would be, but contrast that with the opportunity for the community. If you look at Tampa's scorecard, Tampa didn't do well at all economically. We are the laggard in the region. We're a laggard in the state economically. And if we want to change that, we need to create a new economic plan. Sustainability. After we got off the phone last night, I called a bunch of my friends and mentors who are involved with sustainability and resilience, and none of them thought that economic development was synonymous with those two. They work together, but they're not synonymous, and one doesn't replace the other. And all of the other T3 committees are additional input and information that could be added to this committee. So here's the thing: the community lined up this morning talking about equity. People are marching in the streets demanding equity, and we've got a solution to move this forward. I think we should move forward and have a committee like this. And I can make a motion now or later, but I'd like to ask your support to ask staff to finish the job of working to put this together. The only thing we need to do is to say yes, and then it sounds like volunteers are going to put it together for us.
Mr. Chair?
Councilman Goods.
So from hearing from Ms. Post and hearing from Mr. Carlson, I guess I circled the key thing from Ms. Post was the staff. Now I hear from Mr. Carlson saying that an outside source could do this at no cost. So I'm trying to fuse the two together. If the staff is the issue, we don't have to worry about staff because the outside source would do that and there's no cost. So I'm trying to figure out what is the issue on this end over here if staff is not an issue, because you're going to get free staff over here.
Well, I don't think staff is the only issue, and I don't think it's actually the primary issue.
Okay.
I think the concern was more of taking the process that we've had underway and unifying this under the umbrella of its sustainability and resilience, and in terms of saying sustainability and resilience and how they connect to economic development, that they are not synonymous, but they do work together. They do tie into each other. And so having a separate work stream that is not necessarily connected to the work stream that we are already planning to do, it just provides an opportunity for those to diverge. We'd rather unify, and that was in the several conversations that I had with Councilman Carlson, is complete support for the concept and absolute support for the intended goals. We just wanted to work in a way that brought all of our efforts together and how to execute that and bring all of the stakeholders that would be involved in that, rather than have them be on separate groups or in separate conversations, bringing those together. Having the community charrettes, the neighborhood activities, the roadmap for that is one of inclusiveness, and that is ultimately our end game. So it isn't, we will be working hard to get that done. It isn't necessarily a staff constraint. That was one item of our discussion, but it was more about marrying the two concepts rather than having them be divergent.
Because I read the article that the mayor was saying in reference to, again, it was staff. If I read the article correctly, she still stated that she didn't know we'd be duplicating work because of, and putting staff to duplicate work. I still hear the word staff, so I'm trying to see how we fuse this all together. You said a united front. If Mr. Carlson has this idea about this group, I'm not the expertise on the economic basis he is, but if he's got this group over here that can still filter information to your group or what have you, how do we make this all work? So I'm just trying to be able to help my colleague a little bit by the same token, listening at what we have to make sure that there's a bond somewhere. So I'm just wondering, this may be tabled for another conversation with you and our colleague to see how we can fuse this together, maybe, perhaps. Any thoughts on that? Or I mean, I'm just.
Well, it was part of our conversation yesterday. We very much would like to fuse the concepts together. That's exactly what I'm proposing, is to fuse the concepts that he has set forth that we agree with into our forthcoming advisory team, which will have a multitude of subsections and committees to it that we believe would garner the feedback, the comments.
But I think he's saying, I know you've got your group already working. I think he's trying to say he wants some other outside people that maybe you don't have, that he was asking to be appointed to your different groups to make sure that what he's asking the work to be done, that we're on the same page and moving down the same road versus another road that the administration might want to go, but you've got those people that we appoint to kind of be a part of your unification to make sure those ideas are really clicking with everybody in this council.
Understood. Our groups aren't set up yet. So
Okay,
no one has been described or defined.
Is that right, Mr. Carlson? Am I kind of on the page with it, sir?
Heard. Councilmember Carlson, then we go to Vieira and Dingfelder.
Yeah, I think the bottom line here, and by the way, it's not my committee. It's either a committee of the city council or it's a committee of the city. And of course, there would be some staff time in coordinating with them, but it would be run outside. But the big question, the big thing here is, doesn't the economy deserve to have a discussion of its own? We had a 4-hour discussion about Bayshore, and as I said last night to Ms. Post, who I have the utmost respect for, in the Bayshore feedback, we got some people who want to close down Bayshore completely every day, and we got some people who want to leave it as it is and raise the speed limit, and everything in between. And so getting more public input is great. Eventually, on Bayshore, we've got to make a decision. The city and staff have to make a decision on it, but we have to hear all the input. What's the harm in hearing more input? And especially, doesn't the economy deserve to have a committee of its own? Doesn't the economy deserve to have a discussion? If Tampa was the big success story economically, you can look at any of the numbers and see that it wasn't. If Tampa was the big economic success story, say, fine. The next thing we need to work on is resiliency and sustainability and all those things are inputs to the economy, and they're related to economic development. But there's no T4. There's not an economic committee. If you say, hey, we're going to add a fourth one, great. That's mixing up the alliteration, sorry. Anyway, I think it should have its own. Last night, just exploring options, I threw out, what if you renamed your committee Sustainability, Resilience, and Economy, or Economic Development, and then set up an economic subcommittee of it, because that essentially would do the same thing, and the answer was no. So if the economy does not have an important role in a committee, I think it's going to be relegated to something very small. And there are other big issues that need to be talked about in resiliency and sustainability that are not connected to the economy. And I think we have to make sure that if any of us are sitting here in 7 years, that we did everything we could to make sure the economy is successful. And the diversity, all those things she listed, the home ownership rate, the poverty rate, all those things are critically important. But overall, the umbrella of it is that we want our economy to do well. We don't want to be the laggard in the region anymore. If we don't at least even set up a committee for 6 meetings, I think we're not doing our job to try to boost the economy in every way we can.
Thank you very much. Councilman Vieira.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I mean, what I keep on thinking of is if there can't be any common ground met, I mean, like Councilman Goods, I want to, as a professional courtesy to our colleague, Councilman Carlson, who's obviously very passionate about this, can we do some sort of an internal city council group? We have the Budget Advisory Board. Mr. Chairman before had talked about something that I thought was a great idea, a Transportation Advisory Board. You know, something to that effect that could be time limited to address the concerns that Councilman Carlson has brought up. Again, I want to be supportive. If the administration is taking that position, it's that there's, if you're in a relationship with somebody and somebody doesn't want to be there with you, then that's the end of that relationship. And if that's going to be a burden, then maybe we can look at doing something that is internal. So again, I want to support Councilman Carlson, but we can maybe have a discussion on something done internally for City Council that is not unlike the Budget Advisory Board, for example. Maybe an internal compromise.
Thank you very much, Councilman Dingfelder.
You can tell that Councilman Vieira and I spent a lot of time in mediation.
Hey, lawyers.
Yeah, too much. A lot of billable hours.
A lot of hours in front of a mediator, and I've actually been trained in mediation. So my question, Ms. Post, is this, is how long do you anticipate your process that you've described to us, yours being the administration, the mayor, that process to be? Is maybe 6 months or so?
Thank you for the question. In fact, we anticipate that this process endures through the remainder of the mayor's term as long as she is in office. That is the concept of the sustainability and resiliency umbrella, is that it is an ongoing, it's really an issue you never completely solve. You just continue to work at and work to improve and make iterative improvements. And so that it has a long-standing lifespan.
More specifically, the other 4 committees generated a report and recommendations within X period of time. I'm just wondering, do you anticipate this committee doing that initially? I understand it goes on and on forever, and I'm glad that we hired, Mr. Reamer to carry that on.
So I think as you said, the first 4 committees had very finite times. This group will be longer standing. The mission will continue indefinitely, and the effort to execute a roadmap will have a defined time, but it will be longer than 90 days. To some extent, we were waiting for Whit to join us. He will help drive this plan and this map with the Catalyst group. We don't have a specific time frame. It is expected that this is a longer undertaking than the 90 days.
Okay. Mr. Bennett, were you chiming in on this point, or?
I think Ms. Grimes was first.
Well,
Ms. Grimes, when's she next?
I just want to make a point. When I was going through the nationwide or maybe worldwide selection process that landed Mr. Reamer, we had approached council also on the CRA side of the equation, and we were looking for a broadening, as Ms. Post has been talking about. But one of the things that has come out is our relationship and your approval of the Resilient Cities Catalyst was a 100 city report worldwide about this. And to Mr. Carlson's point about the naming of the opportunity and the inclusion, not only of the content, but of the people and the equity is something that I think this administration is I know I'm extremely passionate about, and I haven't found anybody yet that has been dispassionate about that. And one of the two things that are baked into this process, and I'm reading right from the report that I used to brief council when I came back from the Netherlands, is economic development and social equity. And so those are actually subsets of the entire sustainability and resilience process. And that's the one I'm actually looking the most for, those results. And that's why Mr. Reamer did so well in the selection process, is because he has a passion for that. And to Carol's point about the duration of this being never ending, that is a truism that I think is going to be soaked into the sustainability and resilience process. And to create that inclusion from the community that has already been represented in the 4 advisory groups and will be never ending and broadened in the 5th one. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Councilman Good.
Let me just finish up, Mr. Goods. Unless Gina, was there something that you wanted to add, or?
Yes. Yeah, there is.
Go ahead, and I'll yield the floor temporarily.
I just wanted to bring to the attention of some of the council members and maybe remind some of the others that were on the Charter Review Board that there is a newer charter provision that's applicable to this situation. Previous to when the Charter Review Board made the changes they did, council had no authority to establish a committee. As you all know, council has all the legislative authority and only that administrative authority that's identified in the charter. So the Charter Review Board made a change to the provision in the charter dealing with committees. And what it provided is that council would have the authority to establish a committee, including standing committees or ad hoc committees, by resolution, but a check and balance was added. And a resolution establishing a committee also would require the recommendation of or approval of the mayor. So a check and balance, similar to the mayor negotiates contracts, but they can't be executed unless city council approves it. Roles are reversed in this situation. Council wants to propose a committee, but it can't be established unless and until the mayor recommends or approves it. I think you heard Ms. Post's recommendation. It's to merge the concepts that Mr. Carlson has proposed into a committee that is already underway, and that for council to appoint a council member to that committee. That is my understanding of their recommendation. And again, when it comes to these checks and balances, just like we do all the time every week with agreements, we try to work together and exchange information and then come out with an outcome that is acceptable to both sides.
So just to finish up, Mr. Chairman? Just to finish up, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Grimes. Mr. Carlson, it's interesting. I wasn't aware of what Ms. Grimes just said, but it adds an interesting little flavor to this. What I was going to suggest in the name of trying to mediate this is that perhaps if we specifically continued your item 36, let's say for 6 months, along with the idea of specifically council appointing you, or at least recommending your appointment to the mayor to be on their committee, whatever it is they're doing, to participate in that. 6 months from now, when this comes back, if you feel like that committee is not going in the right direction, not going in the direction that you've suggested, then you can bring it back to us and tell us why, and maybe we need to go in a different or a parallel direction. I agree with Mr. Bennett. I think the end point, and Ms. Post, the end point is the same or similar. And I know you, and I know that you're well-meaning, and I love the ideas that you put forth. But I do have concern about staff time and also about the viability of, if we have two different committees running parallel at the same time, it just, I don't know, it doesn't seem to be an efficient use of our community's time. So that would be my suggestion, Mr. Carlson. I'll throw it at you at any point Mr. Chairman wants to recognize you, how you would feel just to continue your proposal for 6 months, and hand in hand, hopefully this council would appoint you, or at least recommend your appointment to serve on their body.
Go ahead, Councilman Carlson.
First of all, I don't care personally whether I'm on a committee or not. I think any of us would serve well on a committee like that and represent the city and the council. My concern is that I think the economy, and it's not just economic, well, it's an economic advisory committee. The economy is a separate subject. It's connected to all the other committees and task forces that the mayor put together, but there's no specific committee that's looking at the economy. And I even found, I think, solutions to some of the concerns they had about how to manage it. If they added the economy to the name of that task force, I still think it's not connected. It's not, sustainability and resiliency are connected to the economy and vice versa. But there are very big topics that need to be discussed in these big umbrellas. We've had, what did you say, 4 or 5 task forces running concurrently. It doesn't hurt to have one that's focused on the economy, because ultimately people are going to be upset in the community as they are now, because there's not economic equity, and economic equity is a piece of it. But how do we grow our economy? If we were the laggard in the region, the laggard in the state, if we didn't gain any ground against our peer cities, and if the middle class shrank and people in poverty increased, why would we not spend a little bit of staff time to put together a committee for it? I don't understand why we would. It's not the same. The economy is not the same as sustainability and reliance. If they want to go back to my proposal last night and add the name economy, so sustainability, resiliency, and economy, and set up a subcommittee that's specifically focused on the economy, I'm okay with that. It's not my choice. I'd rather have a separate committee on the economy, but I offered that last night in trying to merge and work together, and the response I got was, it's our way or the highway. And how far am I supposed to go? Just say, okay, I'm fine not doing it. If you guys don't agree with me, then the idea is dead anyway. But I think the community is going to judge us by whether we did all we could to not only get out of this economic crisis we're in, but also did we do everything to make Tampa successful economically.
Thank you very much. Councilman Goods.
I want to make sure I have it right, Ms. Post, because I know that the mayor's had certain groups who have submitted their ideas for housing and so forth, correct? And that's a part of your task force, correct?
We've had a number of individuals from across the community participate in the 4 task forces that were underway through the summer and the fall.
And they've already submitted their reports, correct?
And those reports have been finalized. Their input was incorporated. There was public forums associated with those work groups, and each of those 4 have been concluded. They now boil up into and create the framework, the foundation for sustainability and resilience, which is the last chapter.
All right, so now we've got those 4 groups that have done their thing. They've submitted it to you and your other group. They're going to look at to fuse everything together. But I have to look at Mr. Carlson's point about economy. And I'm kind of leaning to see where he's going. If we've done these 4 pillars, we're not in a rush. We got time to add a 5th pillar or a group or 6 weeks or whatever to talk about that. Didn't add to the other 4, and whatever you're going to fuse together, you can be able to fuse that economy portion in there. I get it, but I'm kind of saying, well, sustainability, resilience, and then we talking economy. So I'm kind of seeing where he's going a little bit. So I'm kind of, saying we've had these other groups, housing and all these other groups. So what's really wrong with just spending this a little time? I don't think it's a big deal with a bunch of staff just to look at economy. Yes, ma'am.
So first of all, we actually are in a rush. We feel these issues are, and this, I'm not saying that this is a reason why we would or would not do anything. I just mean that more philosophically. We have a sense of urgency about what we're doing, and we really desire to move rapidly. And, but putting that aside, if I may just for a moment respectfully, I just want to respond to something that Councilman Carlson said about our conversation and our discussion about how to join our forces. And when the reference was made to forming an economy subgroup or committee, we agreed with that. There was not a note my way or the highway. In fact, the entire discussion was premised on our way. How can we make this our way? And the idea of having an economy, a group of individuals, experts, professionals, advocates who could focus on the economy as a subsection or a subchapter is completely acceptable to us. I think we just got caught up on whether we name it or title it, and frankly, I said, I don't think we have to worry about that right now. We're worried about the substance. So if we're in agreement on the substance and what we're trying to accomplish, and economy is an enormous part of that, then we're in agreement on the fundamentals. What we call it, it just seems insignificant.
Would that still be allowable with I guess, the appointments on this committee if you did a subcommittee?
I believe it would be acceptable to me. And I think that, again, the notions that are set forth here are derivative of what drive our economy, and they would be baked in anyway. So if it is better to emphasize that by calling out a separate committee, I think that could be workable, yes.
All right, well, again, it's not what we can do. What we can do, Mr. Carlson, I think it's back to you, sir.
Mr. Carlson, rebuttal?
Thank you. Yeah, I still think that I can't stress enough how important the economy is to our community. And all these other topics are important as well, and they all drive into it. If we don't work on sustainability and resiliency, it's going to hurt our economy. If we don't work on transportation and housing, it's going to hurt our economy. But we need to focus on our economy. I'd like, just to try to bring a conclusion to this, can I make a motion or a couple motions?
Would you like to do it now or wait till the end under new business?
Well, I think
You
while Ms.
gotta hear, you better do it now.
To keep
All right,
Ms.
go-
Post from having
Do
to
it now, all right.
stay all day. I feel strongly that we should, especially in the instance that they can't put the word economy in the name of the committee. I think it does not draw enough attention to the topic, and I think the economy is critically important. We knew that if we went into unemployment that we would have problems. We see that cycle every 10 years, and recessions always hurt us. Our economy has been hurt because we haven't diversified it enough, and we haven't focused on all those other issues that we talked about. So I would like to make a motion that City Council ask, I would like to make a motion that City Council ask that city staff work with Councilmember Carlson to find an outside objective partner that would volunteer their services to organize, facilitate, and report on an economic advisory committee. This committee would meet 4 to 6 times for 2 hours each, and would be made up of diverse community members addressing key economic concerns, strategies, and data for the community.
All right, we have a motion from Councilman Carlson. Do you have a
but it would cover all those things. The only difference I made, and the reason why I had different language, was that in the first conversation that we had after the motion, Ms. Post asked me to reduce the time of it. So instead of having an ongoing committee, I reduced it to 4 to 6 meetings. And then
I'm not a certified mediator, and I apologize for that. But what I see here is 3 good things going in different ways. So maybe we could put this aside for 1 week and let you speak to the administration. Maybe you can have 1 or 2 members of your committee, whoever you want to get. I don't care who you get. I understand what you put here, but it could be, and they can work with the administration to get this done. That way the staff thing would be covered, everything would be covered, and jointly, I'm just throwing it out. Up to you to put it together. It was your idea and a good one. I'm not saying it's
do you want to
not.
make a motion?
No, you make the motion. Listen, before motion's on the floor, and I'm a diabetic, and I gotta speak quick, because I'm going down quick. So what I'm trying to tell you is to get, I'm not against it, but I wanna make sure that also that the way the charter reads, that we're not stepping somebody else's toes by doing something different. At the same time, have competing interests to get the same goal done. You can only score when you have the football. You can't score unless you're a bad passer when you're on defense.
How about if, could I?
Go ahead.
Mr. Carlson, just a suggestion.
Yeah.
I think Mr. Miranda's on the right path. I think Ms. Post does want to work. Maybe you hold off your motion and get with Ms. Post, and you guys kind of work that out. And it was a phone call, but maybe now sit down with her and maybe work that out and then bring it back.
Could you all, we had one conversation last night, late about it, and I'm happy to make a motion if you all want. First of all, I'd like to withdraw that other motion.
Okay.
Second, if one of you would like to make a motion, I would second it, but I could make a motion, and it would be something like to ask me to meet with Ms. Post and the mayor's office to try to come up with a solution where there would be a strong component of an economic advisory committee or supporting the economy in some way.
Second.
We have a second, but Councilman Dingfelder would like to speak. Go ahead, sir.
I'm good with that.
Oh, you're good? All right, we have a motion for Councilman,
And report back on the 25th.
Councilman Citro.
Report back on the 25th.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Carlson. And I hope you emphasize that report back to the council.
Yep.
Report
Okay.
back on the 25th.
Thank
right.
you.
We have a motion from Councilman Carlson, a second from Councilman Goods, to come back on June 25th under staff reports. All in favor?
All right.
Any opposed? No? All right, anything else, sir?
No,
No? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I know we have another item pulled for discussion, and once we conclude that, we're going to take a lunch break because we come back at 5 o'clock for 20 more items for a separate meeting. Chief Bennett.
Blame Ms. Grimes.
Now, good afternoon, council. You had, I believe, pulled item 21 for staff dialogue, and we have Mr. Spearman and Mr. Beatty here if you need to ask questions on it.
Any discussion from any council members? Any questions?
Um,
This is that $500,000 ditch mowing and maintenance service.
Yeah, in regard to item 21, and this is Mr. Vieira's committee, we're all very conscious now of the budget shortfalls that we will likely be headed toward over this year and the next couple of years probably because of COVID. As a result, when I look at the agenda, I look even more carefully than I ever did in terms of what we're spending. Specifically, sometimes we renew contracts from years before. If the vendor's doing a good job and we think we have a good bid, then we renew those awards. And I'm not telling y'all anything you don't know. Typically, I know staff works very hard, and especially in this environment, to get the vendor to renew at the same price point that they had the prior year. And then that way, we can continue to save money. In this particular item 21, I couldn't help but notice there's a 2.3% increase, which is not huge, but I did ask Mr. Spearman why we would allow or encourage the vendor to increase that. So he explained adequately to me why we did, and in this particular case, I'm okay with moving forward on item 21, unless somebody else has a question.
All right, any other questions? No? Would you like to move it now or just wait until we come back and do the consent agenda?
I'll move it now just so they can move.
All right, we have a motion from Councilman Dingfelder with a second from Councilman Miranda, I believe. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All righty, thank you very much. We are going to...
Sorry to make you wait.
No, it's all right. We are going to recess now for...
Mr. Chairman, there was one other item, and I think Mr. Rajero is here for it, and we could...
Which one?
We could get rid of him. Item 11,
Mm.
I had requested it earlier. This is that refinance. It's $46 million. I feel like anytime we're doing something with, it might be 11 and 12, anytime we're doing something with $46 million, the public needs to hear about it and why.
Mr. O'Hara?
Apologies for moving slowly. Thank you, council, and good afternoon. Dennis Rogero, Chief Financial Officer. Regarding these items, as you know, the city and, well, indeed the rest of the world are facing a number of multi-year challenges associated with the pandemic. In our search, and we'll continue to search, for solutions associated with these challenges and in discussion with our financial advisors, we've revisited the items you have in front of you right here. These items, if you approve them, will allow us to be proactive and will give us an opportunity to restructure existing debt in a more manageable way. Again, if you approve them, it's going to assist us in balancing next year's budget, the year's budget after that, and maybe even the year's budget after that. This is a multi-year challenge again. It will allow us to get back on target with some of the things we thought we were going to have to defer. For example, the body-worn cameras that you discussed earlier. It will mitigate the reductions we may have to make to budget those those years ahead of us. In sum, it'll provide over $40 million in flexibility in our general fund. We are happy to have this opportunity, but I do want to stress this is not a panacea. This is not a one-stop solution to the challenges we're going to continue to have
Mr. Chair.
over the next few years.
Can I interrupt just a second? I'm getting text messages that the live feed cut off sometime in the last few minutes. Do we know if it's back live again?
Uh-oh.
It's back on.
The live feed has been cut off.
Thank you.
All right, continue, sir.
And we're back. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to brief you all ahead of time. I appreciate that, I really do. And we can answer any questions you may have.
All right, any questions from council members? Councilmember Dingfelder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just so everybody knows, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Dennis, in your briefing, I believe that even though we are, this is going, pushing this item down the road a little bit and extending it instead of 3 years, I think 8 years approximately. It will cost us a little bit more total.
Yes, sir, and that's where I was going when I said we revisited this item. We've looked at it before and didn't want to spend additional funding. All told, it'll be about $1.4 million in net present value that it will cost us to extend this debt another 8 years.
Mr. Chairman, I'll support this item just because, like I said, we are going to have some cash flow issues over the next year or more, and this will help us get through those cash flows.
Thank you very much. Any other council members have questions? No? Who would like to move the resolution? Who would like to move the resolution?
I'll do it.
All right, Councilman Vieira has made the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Councilman Moran. All in favor?
Aye.
All right,
Was that 11 and 12?
that was 11. 12 we'll do, it's not a part 1 and 2, so we have to do them separately. Any questions or anything on number 12? No? All right, do I have a motion to move that resolution, item number 12?
Motion move.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Good, second from Councilmember Citro. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are in recess until 3 o'clock.
Thank you, council.
Züchtä diginu no handasia. Яшни зüchtä diginu oneskisifunu no handasia. Thank